Somewhere inside you, a deeper truth already lives. It whispers when the world goes quiet. It stirs beneath the thoughts that say, "I'm not there yet." And today, I want to help you hear it. Not as a theory, not as a hope, but as your new emotional home. Because what if the very act of trying to manifest more is what's holding it back? What if the constant reaching, the affirmations, the rituals, the search for signs are all beautiful echoes of a deeper misunderstanding? What if you're not supposed to become anything at all, but simply remember what you already are? Let yourself settle as these words move through you. Because this is not about adding more effort. It's not about becoming better, faster, or more enlightened. It's about releasing the illusion that says you are still on the way. You've read the books, you've visualized the dreams, you've spoken the affirmations, and still, maybe you feel the silent weight of waiting, as if something isn't clicking, as if life is showing you the opposite of what you've been calling in. That's not failure. It's a sacred invitation to look deeper, to the root of it all. Not what you're doing, but who you believe yourself to be while doing it. Neville Goddard said, "You do not become what you want. You become what you assume yourself to be." And that single line contains the entire universe of conscious creation, because wanting, in itself, contains an energy, and that energy says, "I do not yet have." So every time you try to manifest something, love, wealth, peace, from the place of needing it, you're unknowingly affirming the absence of it. The subconscious does not hear the words, "I want." It hears the vibration of lack and reflects it back. This is the paradox that confuses so many awakened souls. The more they try, the more distant the dream seems to become. And it's not your fault. You've been told that effort is holy, that desire is divine. And it is, until it begins to affirm separation. Until it becomes a cycle of almost arriving, but never quite becoming. The mirror won't show you the image until you stand in front of it as the one who already is. And that is the shift. Not from effort to inaction, but from separation to identity. You don't magnetize what you chase, you magnetize what you embody. Even neuroscience agrees. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains that your brain doesn't create based on goals. It creates based on your identity. Your nervous system, your thoughts, your hormones, all align to who you believe you are, not what you hope to be. So when you meditate from the mindset of getting there, your biology interprets that as not there yet. And the reality that manifests will mirror exactly that assumption. So what if, just for a moment, you stopped trying? Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally stepping into the self that no longer seeks, the one who doesn't chase abundance but expresses it, the one who doesn't pray for peace but radiates it, the one who isn't walking toward love because it's already living within their chest. Feel into this now, that gentle, sacred remembering, that soft dissolving of distance. There is no climb, no spiritual mountain, no finish line. There is only this. The moment you assume it's already true, the universe moves to match your frequency, not because you demanded it, but because you've become it. So let today be the turning point, not into more striving, but into stillness, into trust, into your truest state of being, not the seeker of the light, but the source of it. Let's go deeper now, because the path isn't forward, the path that is inward. You may not see it at first, because it hides beneath good intentions, beneath the vision boards, the morning affirmations, and the deep, honest desire to change your life. But there's a trap so subtle that most spiritual seekers fall into it without even knowing, the trap of trying to manifest from the emotional state of not having. It feels like forward motion, but vibrationally, it's a quiet loop. A loop where desire is laced with disbelief, where the very energy meant to open the door or keeps it shut. Neville said it simply, and with unwavering clarity, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not work toward it, not wait for it to arrive. To assume means it's already real, already yours, already alive in your nervous system. But what happens when we say, "I want more money," or "I'm trying to attract love"? We're declaring, without realizing, that we don't have it. And the subconscious, which only responds to vibration, not logic, registers that lack and reflects it outward. The science mirrors the mysticism. Your reticular activating system, The part of the brain responsible for filtering what's real will only highlight experiences that match your dominant emotional frequency, not your goals, not your plans, not your vision board. So when you sit in hope but vibrate in absence, your brain says, let's confirm that absence. And it finds ways to make it true. This is why so many can meditate for years and still feel stuck. They close their eyes to visualize their dream, but the body is still rehearsing old memories. The cells still carry the energy of not yet. They speak affirmations, but with the tone of waiting. They visualize the new life while feeling the old one. And so nothing changes. Because manifestation isn't created from mental pictures. It's born from emotional alignment. The world doesn't respond to what you imagine. It responds to what you embody. That's why a subtle, sacred shift is needed. Not more effort, but more embodiment. When you catch yourself saying, I hope this works, or I'm trying to believe, gently pause and ask instead, if this were already real, what would I feel right now? Let your posture change. Let your breath deepen. Let your chest remember the sensation of already having. That question dissolves the illusion of distance. It turns effort into arrival. Imagine now a full glass. You try to pour more water in, but it spills over. Because the glass is already full. That's what happens when we keep efforting on top of wholeness. We spill the essence. We miss the stillness that allows the reflection to appear. The version of you that has doesn't need to try. They simply are. And the moment you remember that version, the world shifts to meet you. Not because you forced it, but because you've become the frequency it was always waiting for. It sounds noble. The desire to grow, to evolve, to become your best self. And yet, beneath that aspiration, the ego often hides, not as a villain, but as a well-dressed guest in the temple of your awakening. It whispers, you're almost there. It promises breakthroughs just around the corner, and it keeps you moving, seeking, learning, trying, but never truly arriving. Because if you were to fully arrive, the ego would no longer have a role. This is identity addiction, the need to keep becoming so that the current self never dies. And in that endless becoming, there's an avoidance of what already is. Stillness threatens the ego's narrative. Silence ends its story. And so it keeps you running, not out of malice, but out of fear of disappearance. Neville pierced this illusion with a single invitation. Be still and know that you are. Not you are becoming. Not you are improving. Simply, you are. That stillness is not stagnation. It's power. It's the end of chasing, the end of needing proof. It's where manifestation becomes natural, not strategic, where you no longer use spiritual tools to reach a future version because you've become the source. But the mind resists this because psychology shows us the arrival fallacy, the illusion that happiness will be found in the next achievement, the next income goal, the next relationship. But when those things arrive, the same emptiness returns. Because it was never about the thing, it was about the self you thought you had to become to deserve it. Now imagine a treadmill labeled evolution. You run and run, feeling the burn of growth. But when you stop, you're still in the same room. That's what the ego does with spiritual progress. It gives the sensation of movement without true transformation. And here's the quiet truth. Transformation doesn't always feel like movement. Sometimes it feels like rest, like letting go, like remembering what's always been true. So pause now, not with your body, but with your inner striving. Feel the version of you that doesn't need one more breakthrough, not because you're giving up, but because you've woken up. And in that still presence where nothing is being chased, something sacred emerges. Your real self, the self that doesn't perform evolution, but radiates wholeness. You don't need to become anything else, because what you are, when undisturbed by effort, is already divine. It's not just the mind that holds memories. The body remembers too, with astonishing loyalty. It remembers how fear felt at the end of the month. It remembers the subtle tension of not being enough. It remembers striving, pleasing, proving. And even when your conscious mind declares a new reality, your body may still be rehearsing an old one. This is why change feels so elusive. Not because you're not trying hard enough, but because your nervous system has made the past feel like home. Your biology is built for survival, not expansion. So if abundance, love, or freedom feel unfamiliar, the body treats them as unsafe. It tightens, it resists, it pulls you back to the emotional chemistry it knows, even if that chemistry is pain. Dr. Joe Dispenza says that 95% of our behavior is driven by subconscious programs. That means even with the best intentions, if your identity hasn't shifted, your reality won't either. And identity doesn't shift through thought alone. It shifts through feeling, because feeling is the language of the body. Neville Goddard understood this with profound clarity. Feeling is the secret, he said, because to feel differently is to signal a new frequency. And when that feeling becomes consistent, the body adapts. The chemistry changes, the posture shifts, the breath deepens, and life begins to mirror the new signal, not as a reward, but as a natural reflection of your internal state. So the question becomes, how do you teach the body something it's never felt before? Not by force, not by repetition alone, but by rehearsing it emotionally. Begin to inhabit the version of you who already has what you seek. Walk as them, breathe as them, speak with their quiet confidence, not as an act, but as a cellular remembering. Because the body doesn't know the difference between a deeply felt imagination and reality. And when you feel the new self long enough, it becomes your new normal. Your body is not your enemy. It's your stage, and it's been performing yesterday's script with perfect commitment. But now a new director is arriving, one who speaks in vibration, in presence, in deliberate being. The old play doesn't need to be judged. It simply needs to be retired. And the moment you step into the new role, with sincerity and stillness, the biology begins to follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because when you become coherent in identity, the body becomes coherent in chemistry, and the loop of lack finally breaks, not with effort but with embodiment. If this message is waking something real in you, pause, breathe, and subscribe. Not to follow more, but to remember more of who you truly are. Not every part of you wants to arrive. This may be difficult to hear, especially when you've been affirming your desires with such devotion, but deep beneath your conscious intentions, there may be parts of you that tremble at the thought of finally having what you asked for, because for many, fulfillment feels like a death, the death of the identity built around striving, the death of the story that says, one day, when I get there, I will finally be enough. So when that day seems close, something inside resists, not because you don't want it, but because you've tied your safety to the chase. If your worth has been built on effort, what happens when effort is no longer needed? If your belonging has depended on your struggle, who will you become in your liberation? These are not questions of logic. They live in the nervous system. They live in the body that flinches at ease, in the breath that holds itself when good things come, in the mind that quietly asks, will I still be loved if I no longer suffer? Neville Goddard knew this resistance well. That's why he said, change your conception of yourself, because every fulfilled dream demands the surrender of an old identity, and that surrender can feel like grief, not for what you've lost, but for what no longer defines you. When you shift from the one who's always almost there to the one who already is, the entire self-image built around effort begins to dissolve. And it is that dissolution the ego fears most. Psychology calls it self-sabotage, but it's deeper than that. It's identity protection. The subconscious is not trying to ruin your dreams. It's trying to preserve your sense of self, even if that self is small, even if that self is tired. Because small and tired can feel familiar, predictable, safe. And so the dream remains just out of reach, not because it's too big, but because the old self believes it won't survive in its presence. But there's another way, a quieter way. Instead of forcing yourself into success, invite the body to feel safe inside it. Visualize not with adrenaline, but with calm. See the life you desire, not as a fantasy, but as your natural rhythm. Let abundance feel like rest. Let love feel like breathing. Let peace feel like returning home. Not because you're trying to program it, but because you're letting the nervous system know it's allowed. And in this space, something profound shifts. Fulfillment no longer threatens who you are. It reveals who you've always been beneath the striving. You are not the one who chases. You are the one who receives, not because you forced arrival, but because you created a self who no longer fears it. There comes a point on the spiritual path when even the search for light can become a form of darkness, Not because spirituality is wrong, but because the act of seeking becomes a mask, a distraction, a beautiful performance that hides a deeper fear, the fear of simply being, the fear of no longer needing to search. And so we trade old addictions for new ones, not substances but signs, not drama but synchronicities. And without realizing it, the sacred quest becomes another way to avoid ourselves. You wait for the angel numbers, you chase downloads, you ask the universe for signs, and still, peace feels distant. Not because the signs aren't real, but because you've placed your power in them. You've made confirmation more important than conviction. You've confused movement with embodiment. Neville Goddard warned of this inversion when he said, "Signs follow, they do not precede." In other words, reality reflects belief, it does not create it. Yet the mind, especially in moments of uncertainty, begins to crave patterns. Psychology calls this pattern-seeking bias, the tendency to extract meaning from random data, to feel in control. You see a feather on the ground and declare it a message. You hear a song and assign it a purpose. And while these moments can be beautiful, they can also become noise, especially when you start needing them to feel safe, needing them to validate what your heart already knows. The more you seek confirmation, the more you anchor yourself in doubt, because true knowing doesn't search. It settles, it listens, it waits without waiting, it breathes without proof. And in that quiet, something more powerful than signs begins to emerge: sovereignty, the kind of inner stillness that doesn't chase clues, but walks in faith. Not blind faith, embodied faith. A faith that doesn't ask for permission, because it already feels the truth. Now imagine this: a loaf of bread in the oven. If you keep opening the door to check if it's rising, you interrupt the process. You slow down the becoming, not because you lack skill, but because you lack stillness. The manifestation process is no different. Every time you check to see if it's working, you re-enter the frequency of doubt, and the dough, once expanding, begins to deflate. The most radical thing you can do is stop asking for signs. Not forever, just long enough to notice who you are without them, just long enough to hear your own clarity without external echoes, just long enough to realize that your knowing is enough. When you release the addiction to external proof, you step into the only real power that was ever needed: inner resonance. And from that place, signs become what they were always meant to be: reflections, not requirements; mirrors, not maps; echoes, not instructions. The true path is not found through constant looking. It is revealed in stillness, in trust, in the sacred space where nothing is added and everything is remembered. Every time you say, "I'm becoming," you are also quietly saying, "I'm not yet." And in that subtle contradiction, the distance between you and your desire stretches. It's a distance made not of space, but of identity, of assumption, of the invisible thread that binds your self-perception to a future that always seems slightly out of reach. You walk toward the version of you who has it, but the walking itself confirms that you are not there. And so the path grows longer, even as you take each step. Neville Goddard called this the law of reversibility, that the state of being precedes the unfolding, that when you assume the end, emotionally, vibrationally, with full conviction, the means naturally arrange themselves, but when you focus on the means, you often delay the end, because your attention is not resting in fulfillment, it's locked in effort, in hope, in the unspoken belief that you must still get there. Quantum physics, in its own poetic way, reflects this same truth. The act of observation collapses potential into form, but only when the observer knows what they are looking for. If you're constantly waiting, watching, wondering if it will appear, your energy remains in the field of possibility, never grounded in embodiment. It's like hovering outside your own life, watching for it to begin, and yet the beginning never comes. Because the only moment that creates is the one where you claim it already is. This is why language matters, not as a performance but as a portal. Words like "I'm working on," "I'm trying to," "I'm getting closer" seem harmless, but they encode your vibration. They program your field, and what they often say is, "I'm still waiting." So shift gently, not with pressure, not with perfection, but with awareness. Begin to say, "I'm remembering," "I'm allowing," "I am," and feel the difference. Feel how the body responds when you speak from the center rather than the edge. Imagine now a ray of light. It doesn't travel to brightness. It doesn't seek the sun. It is the sun. It radiates because it knows nothing else. That's what your true self is. Not a seeker of light, but its source. And every time you tell yourself, I am still becoming, you cloud that light. Not because you are broken, but because you've been taught that becoming is safer than being. That effort is nobler than embodiment. That waiting is more spiritual than claiming. But now, you remember differently. You remember that being is not arrogance. It is not denial. It is truth. And the more you speak from being, the more the world rearranges itself to reflect who you already are. Not the one on the way, but the one who has arrived, quietly, fully, and without needing to prove anything at all. There's a moment in every seeker's journey when the sacred becomes subtle performance. Not because the intention is wrong, but because the heart has quietly started measuring. You say the affirmation and glance at the clock. You visualize, then immediately check your phone for confirmation. You script, then scan your reality for evidence. And when it doesn't show up fast enough, a quiet doubt returns. Am I doing it right? But manifestation is not a stage. It's not a ritual to impress the universe. It is identity. It is inner truth settling into form. Neville Goddard spoke to this directly. You will know when you are self-persuaded. Not when the signs show, not when the money hits the account, but when your inner reality becomes so stable, so quiet, so natural, that you no longer search for proof. That's the paradox. The moment you stop needing evidence, it begins to appear, not because you mastered the technique, but because you stopped performing. Behavioral science calls it the observer trap. The idea that the more you monitor your progress, the more you interrupt the process itself. Flow states vanish under constant evaluation. The body can't relax while being watched. And the same is true for creation. When you turn your spiritual practice into a test, measuring if the technique is working, you introduce anxiety, self-judgment, and subtle rejection of the now. So what if you drop the test? What if you let go of needing to check, to measure, to prove? What if you stopped asking, is it working, and started declaring, it already is? Because the seed doesn't grow under supervision. It grows in stillness, in dark soil, in invisible rhythms of surrender. And every time you dig it up to see if it's sprouting, you interrupt the sacred intelligence already at work. You are not here to supervise your manifestation. You are here to embody its completion. And when you live from the feeling that it is already done, the need to perform dissolves. The practice becomes prayer. The ritual becomes remembrance. And the energy that once tried to impress life now simply expresses it. You're not the one who manifests through perfection. You are the one who creates through presence, through inner persuasion, through the quiet, unwavering trust that what you are being is already becoming. Not because you're checking, but because you finally stopped needing to. There's a form of spiritual effort that wears the mask of surrender, but beneath it, something quieter stirs. Control, the desire to engineer outcomes, to manipulate vibration with precision, to create not from trust but from fear. Fear that if you don't do it right, it won't arrive. Fear that the universe might not hear you unless you direct it carefully. And so, you micromanage the process of becoming. You speak the right words. You visualize at the perfect hour. But the energy underneath is tight. It's calculating. And it's not faith. It's disguised control. This is where the ego enters through the back door. Not as pride, not as superiority, but as a need to guarantee. A need to take the divine flow and turn it into a personal project. Neville Goddard never spoke of control. He spoke of assumption. All transformation begins within the consciousness of being. Not doing, not commanding, being. The difference is subtle, but it's everything. Because control is the language of fear. And fear always tightens the energy field. It narrows possibility. It demands evidence. But assumption expands. It rests. It opens. It does not need to prove or persuade. It simply exists as truth and allows reality to echo that truth in its own way, in its own time. Psychologically, this control mechanism often hides behind a mask of responsibility. You tell yourself, I'm just doing my part. But if that part feels heavy, obsessive, anxious, it's not alignment. It's fear wrapped in spiritual discipline. It's the nervous system trying to stay safe through control. And the irony is that true safety doesn't come from control. It comes from release. So imagine the wind for a moment. It doesn't command the waves. It moves them by being itself. It doesn't need to push the ocean. Its very essence is movement. That's how real manifestation works. Not through control, but through coherence, through the energy of a being so fully aligned with its truth that the world cannot help but respond. Let yourself soften now, not by doing less, but by trusting more. Feel the difference between force and flow, between strategy and surrender, between trying to magnetize and simply becoming magnetic. Because when you stop trying to control the outcome, what you desire begins to find you, not because you gave up, but because you finally remembered who you are and who you've always been. The cause, not the chaser. The presence, not the performer. The source, not the seeker. There is a moment, quiet, unplanned, and deeply sacred, when all effort dissolves, when the trying ends and something deeper takes its place. Not apathy, not resignation, but presence, a stillness so complete that it collapses the illusion of separation. And suddenly what you've been reaching for feels like it's been inside you all along. That moment is not created, it is allowed. And in that allowing, manifestation begins, not as an external response, but as an internal recognition. Neville called this moment assumption. Assume it is done, not think about it, not analyze it, not wait for it, but live from the emotional certainty that it already is. That phrase, simple as it sounds, holds immense power, because it's not about pretending. It's about resting so deeply in the identity of already having, already being, that life has no choice but to reflect it. The assumption ends the psychological distance. It ends the waiting. It ends the search. And science supports this sacred stillness. The parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest, healing, and receptivity, only activates when we feel safe, when we're no longer efforting, no longer chasing. And it's only in this state that the body becomes a fertile ground for change. When the system relaxes, energy flows, and what once felt blocked begins to move. This is why peace is not the result of manifestation. It is the cause. Because the more you relax into identity, the more magnetized your energy becomes, the more available you are to receive, not from a place of passivity, but from embodied knowing. You're not passive, you're present. You're not idle, you're in alignment. And that alignment becomes the space through which life delivers. Now feel the breath for a moment, not as a technique, but as an exhale of effort. Imagine breathing out the need to become, breathing out the question, when will it come? And instead, breathing in the memory that it already is. Let that breath become a letting go, a return, a remembrance. Because when the effort stops, clarity begins. When the stirring ends, the water stills, and only then can it reflect the sky. You don't need to keep trying, not because you're giving up, but because you've shifted into being. You've stepped into the space where the desire is no longer something outside of you. It has become you. It lives in your posture, your tone, your breath, your decisions. And in that collapse of trying, a new world opens, one that doesn't ask you to chase, only to remember, only to allow, only to be. I am is not a wish, a goal, or a mantra. It is the final word before manifestation. The breath before creation. It doesn't ask, it doesn't wait, it is. Neville Goddard called it the name of God within you, not to be earned but remembered. Because the moment you say, I am, and feel it as truth, you stop trying to become. You return to being. This is not affirmation by repetition, it's identity through embodiment. I am is the light that animates the film of your desires. Without it, nothing moves. With it, everything aligns. Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches that when identity shifts, biology follows. Your body doesn't know performance, it knows coherence. And coherence begins with declaring who you already are. I am ends the delay. It collapses distance. It doesn't say one day, it says now. And the more quietly, honestly, and fully you say it, not out loud, but in the rhythm of your breath, the more reality reflects it. You are not on the path. You are the path. You are not becoming the light. You are the light remembering itself. And that changes everything. You're not here to become, you're here to remember. Neville's truth remains. You can't become what you already are. The more you chase, the more you affirm its absence. But when you rest in being, life begins to mirror that stillness. Dr. Bruce Lipton shows that when belief and identity align, the body changes. Reality responds. Manifestation isn't pursuit, it's permission. The moment you stop striving and simply are, everything shifts. Peace isn't the result, it's the cause. And from that peace, you create not by effort, but by presence. You've always been it. Now, just allow it. If this truth is awakening something in you, stay connected. Subscribe now and let each video be a reminder that you're not becoming, you're remembering who you've always been.